Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Ginger Hacker, also Andrew, and today I have a special guest. This is Breaking into Cyber Part 7. So, special edition, we are talking to technology recruiters and getting their aspects and kind of insight when it comes to hiring and helping other companies hire for technology roles. So, funny enough, I have with me another Andrew. So, Andrew here with Staffing Science. Andrew, I'm going to pass it to you real fast to say a quick hello and kind of introduce yourself.
Hey everyone. My name is Andrew Whiteside, working for Staffing Science at the moment. Kind of got into recruiting, what was it, four and a half years ago. Was doing, sales for a while. Studied engineering in college. Did my first kind of engineering job, and then just found my way into recruiting, I guess. So it's been a good ride.
Good stuff, man. Well, yeah, like I said, always glad to have you here, to have all my guests take kind of time and jump onto the podcast and kind of get to break into everyone kind of asking that golden question of how do I break into cyber and what do I do? We're going to go ahead and dive into our first question. So first question I have for you, Andrew, what specific technical skills and certifications would you prioritize when evaluating candidates for entry-level cybersecurity positions?
So for me on my side, there is a bit of nuance to that question, just because from a recruiting standpoint, there's a couple different types of recruiters, internal recruiters, third-party people like myself. So typically, I don't tend to hire for entry-level roles just because companies aren't really looking for an outside resource on those positions, because they can kind of, end up finding them on their own sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
But I do hire for them, from time to time when, let's say I'm already hiring for a company and they're just overloaded and they need some help on those roles. So I would say technical skills and certs are obviously great to have, but for entry-level roles, it's kind of not the best answer, but like experience is going to always trump everything, right? And that's kind of what you want to highlight when you're going for positions. It's just, you don't want to be shelling out a bunch of money for certs and then, of your own money, and then just still be looking for a job for 6 months, So some things that I do know from hiring managers and roles that I've filled, like anything that you can get your hands on, whether it's like scripting technologies, anything automation focused, because I know it's kind of where the world's trending. It's just,
Definitely.
How can we automate our processes, right? So picking up like Python on the side, PowerShell, Bash, whatever, just to help with like scripting stuff, maybe mess around on GitHub, like play on your own, because it's more suited for software engineering roles, but it also does pertain, security of, hey, I built this thing on the side, or set up my own home office with my own, kind of infrastructure. Like that always will set you apart from entry level stuff when you're trying to get in somewhere. And then, the age old thing is just like, who do you know? Right. So
yeah, networking plays a big key of it. And I think definitely one thing that that you mentioned is like the experience is key. Like if you look at somebody and like, I call them cert bunnies, but it's like, you'll see someone that has like 50 certs behind their name, and then someone that has like 5 to 10 years of experience, all because they have the certifications. That's great, because it shows that they can learn and retain the information maybe. But at the end of the day, if I was a hiring manager, I'm like, well, that's great, you have the certs, but can you do the role and do you understand the job? Just like you said, like if you're trying to gain the experience, finding ways to beef up that resume, whether it's internally of finding like maybe some like side hustle work you can do you're already with an internal organization doing some shadowing, or even just like you said, building out a GitHub repository, doing some side projects, showing off that resume of like, hey, look, like I was in law enforcement and I had to pivot somehow, showing like my cyber skills. I started jumping into HackThe, TryHackme, doing LinkedIn learning courses, like on like, just like you said, some scripting stuff, Python, Linux, PowerShell. And like I would kind of throw it out on my LinkedIn post, like, hey, I learned this today, or hey, I was able to do this. And honestly, kind of how Andrew and I met, like I think Andrew reached out to me on a role that I was possibly looking into. And I'm sure, and we'll probably, I think, go on to it too, like how when it comes to like winning, how you look for folks when it comes to certain roles. If you're active in your network and you're sharing and showing those skills you're learning, it can draw attention in good ways. So definitely.
Yeah, I think There was a, kind of tricky problem when you're trying to break into a field, especially, I think the hardest is definitely cyber, just because like, if you're going for a software engineering gig, you can go do a 6-month course, like actually figure out how to do it. And then people are more willing to actually give you a shot. Seems like cyber is more closed netted, where just like, why would I take a shot on someone when, from a hiring manager perspective, it's like, I could just hire someone that has 2 years experience. Unfortunately, that's still looking, right? Which kind of sucks, but, it's not ideal, but, getting into cyber is really hard, where you can, I would say the most easy way I see, I guess, sometimes is people join like help desk roles.
Yep.
Get into ticketing, learn different software platforms, handle instant response kind of stuff, right? And then move into a SOC, tier 1 escalation, and so, and then move upwards in a SOC, and then transition into kind of whatever they want to go into, right? Like red team, blue team, IAM, GRC, whatever.
It's funny, Andrew. The golden bell always, almost with all my interviews, is help desk, help desk, help desk. Like it's an entry way in. People look at it like, oh man, I want to go to help desk. I'm like, I was at help desk initially when I first got in, like way back before I even got into law enforcement. And like it teaches you like just like your communication skills, teaches you reporting and like ticketing, teaches you some like basic like maybe PowerShell like get user or kind of get queries like to pull up Active Directory stuff, writing out tickets and stuff to hire teams. Like there's a lot of things that you look at that 100% kind of pivot to, just like you said, gaining that experience, which feeds into our next question actually, is how important is practical experience compared to formal education in the cybersecurity hiring process? And I know we kind of already touched on that a little bit because like, just like you mentioned, some hiring managers, why hire the guy that's did this boot camp training for 6 months that now knows the skill. However, there's a guy that's been doing it for 1 to 2 years, maybe with no like technical experience or certifications behind him, but he's been inside the actual like software or the process or the project for X amount of time.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like what we were just talking about, but also there is another point we can add to that too, is I actually was just hiring quite a few entry-level SOC roles recently. And some of the hiring managers, had preferences of, they went to good colleges or, went to good courses. I think like the UAT school out here is fairly good. I don't even know what it stands for. It's like the University of Advanced Technology, I think. They got a bunch of good courses, I think. And then I see a lot of people value like the SANS Institute. I don't even know if it costs a bunch of money or not. But
lots of money.
Okay.
SANS, yeah, SANS is mucho dinero. Just to give you an example, like so one SANS certification, whether I think it's remote or in person, runs about $10,000. Now that includes like the full like lesson, or if you're doing the on demand, it gives you like 6 months of the course material, which is like recorded lectures and stuff from the instructors, and then gives you like maybe 1 or 2 practice tests, maybe it doesn't, and then gives you like the certification attempt. Yeah, it's I emphasize like, hey, if you can afford SANS, power to you. 100% leverage work or like your organization though, because yeah, those are the pretty pricey ones. And SANS is great material. The training's excellent. That's probably why they can charge so much, and people are willing to pay for it. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I would probably say, steer away from that for the, so I'm not trying to pay $10,000 and then not be able to get a job, so, but, more towards that question, like formal education, in the hiring process, people will see a lot of jobs out there, companies will put out job descriptions and it's like, you have to have a bachelor's degree, you have to have bachelor's degree in, information technology or cyber, security. I wouldn't steer away from still applying to those roles just because, I mean, who knows who wrote that job description? Could have been ChatGPT, could have been an old JD they had from 4 years ago. They just copy and paste it, right? And yeah, I mean, for me on my side, I'll always send candidates to companies, if they have good experience. Let's say a guy is a 10-year security engineer, doesn't have a degree, but why would they not hire this person? So,
yeah, 10 years is a lot of experience, especially in the engineering roles.
So it kind of comes down to like, all right, if you have a cyber security degree and 3 years experience or no degree and 5 years experience, like it's just going to kind of come down to the preference of the hiring manager and whichever company it is, right? So it's kind of nice to have at least an insider resource of saying, hey, from a recruiting standpoint of like, hey, I've placed 5 people at this company. They don't care about degrees, but it's going to be on the job description, right? Or, hey, these guys actually do care about degrees. It's not worth your time. Like, they just won't even,
Yeah.
like, they can talk to you, right? So.
Oh man, I had a great question. I was going to pivot off that and I lost it, but it'll probably come back to me. Nah, it happens all the time. But no, I mean, like it's odd because it's just like you said, it's like who wrote the job rec? 100% is the question. And it's just like, I know one thing too, like when I'm actively looking and applying for roles, like initially way back when I was younger, it was just like I had a 1-page blanket templated resume that's like, I saw a job I want, I'm like, cool, resume. Oh, here's another job I want, resume. I wasn't changing anything. I wasn't like looking more and being specific of like, hey, what are they looking for? And I'd go in and like tweak responsibly of like what my roles would be that match it. I'd say nowadays, when it comes to me, if I'm actually going actively looking for roles, like I'll make sure I kind of like make sure I apply my skills correctly with that posting, because I call it the HR algorithm. Most companies will have a process that when you apply your resume, it may not even go to a real person for the first hand or two. It might go through a complete automated process, looking for the keywords, looking for the specific hot terms. I could be wrong. I've never been within HR and gone through that process, but it's just like I've been told or heard like, oh yeah, you want to make sure like you're tweaking your resume to match the actual job requirements and stuff when it comes to roles. Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it in a good way, because like when you're out there applying for jobs, it's super time inefficient to tailor your resume for every position that you're applying for. Like going for 50 different jobs, you're changing your resume 50 different times. That's just not a good use of your time.
Yeah.
Because you also don't know what they're looking for, right? Like, I was just hiring for an IT security engineer, and they don't have anything on the JD listing, what certain cloud technologies they were looking for, where it just said any cloud technologies, right? But
okay.
The hiring manager was only talking to people that had a certain one of those, right? So it's like kind of sometimes have to have that insider resource of saying, okay, I need to, if I have experience in these, maybe need to highlight that on my resume so that I actually get the interview. And then also on the flip side too, you don't know who is looking at your resume, like in that first interaction when you do apply to a company. It could be the hiring manager, could be someone in HR that knows tech, so they know, okay, this person, doesn't have Splunk, but they have, Logarithm or some other tool, right? That's similar. So they'll still talk to them.
Okay.
But you might also have your resume be seen by an HR person that doesn't know tech, and they're like, I'm just looking for these 3 things. If you don't have them, I'm not passing your resume along to the hiring manager,
Very true.
So that's why from a outside, like from my side of things, when I'm working with companies, I'm not ever going to have someone put something on the resume that they don't have experience in. But
Definitely.
A lot of people will keep it super broad of saying, worked with these platforms at X company. They won't list out what platforms they, were kind of working in. And then they might not get the interview if I just send the resume over like that, So you kind of have to play the game. And if you're a good match for a role, maybe spend the time of tailoring it towards that job, but don't do it for every position.
No, definitely. I can't count the hours of time I've burnt and wasted many times. I've actually now tweaked it where 90% of the time I'm keeping my resume the same. And for the cover letter, my cover letters will kind of play with like the wording and verbiage to make sure I kind of hit their keywords. But also, like you said, like I never want to, disclaimer alert to everyone listening. Like never put something on your resume that you don't know how to do just because like, oh, they want this on their resume, put it on there. Because first off, if you do make it through and then they ask you about it, you're going to be so unprepared other than like being able to like to Google Dork it or like chat GPT it to spit out your generalized summary. But then like when they ask you maybe like a super, super generic like I'll use Linux for example. Like, hey, like how do you list out a directory? Like ls. But then like if you don't know any experience in Linux and then they ask you that question, like, oh well, you type out list, like, okay, this guy has no experience within Linux. Like it can quickly discredit you just as fast as you think, like, oh well, I'll put these on and then boom, I can get this interview. So no, 100% good call out, Andrew. And that brings us to our third question. What are the most common mistakes candidates make during the application interview process for cybersecurity roles?
Yeah, I mean, that's almost exactly what we were just talking about. Like the first thing I would just say is just having that blanket resume to send out, right? I mean, I spent a lot of time during my week kind of looking at a million resumes, right? And everyone has their own opinion on, there's even like resume writers that people pay money for, and I think that's a bit weird. But
yeah, I'm on that same path. Yep, go on.
It's like, if you did the position in your last job, just kind of think about what you were doing, highlight the key things you did, things you can talk about that you were doing in that role, because they're going to ask you that stuff in the interview anyway, right? So kind of tailoring it towards that, showing the impact you did, definitely the tools that you used, and for example, this does pertain more towards software engineering too, but it does go towards security of, let's say you're working at like U-Haul, right? And, I was working on U-Haul's, I actually had it pulled up here. I just helped someone else today. So he had, as his bullet point, developed and maintained software for all of our trucks and rental equipment. What's that kind of telling you on their resume, right? That's not really giving me much from,
It's a broad statement compared to like, can you narrow it down? Like give metrics, like did X, which accomplished Y, or by completing this, I've been told always give like a metric. So it's like within our SOAR worked X amount of cases per week with an MTTR of this, reducing I've been told to be very specific. I've also been told to be, like you said, broad when it comes to what you want to put on a resume. But yeah, I think like what you ironed out of like trying to be the best candidate for the role is probably like a very super generic. Like if you get through the first interview, usually some companies will do 2 to 3. That first interview is a quick just, hey, how are you? Maybe ask 1 or 2 questions. Maybe a technical one gets thrown in. Come the second or third, that's when they'll say, hey, like we're gonna ask you a little bit more stuff in depth, and then just look over the job rec, see what they're wanting you to kind of get into and do. And just like you said, if you've been doing those positions and the stuff in that current role, just walk through the processes, like standardized and systematic. It's, hey, you start from step 1, you end at step Z. So,
I mean, I basically said, hey, that one sentence, you could change it into, I was responsible for the development of our customer facing platform, which was built using whatever technologies, React, .NET, on a cloud platform using X, Y, and Z. It's like, that sounds way better than just developed our platform for for trucks or something. It's like
updated spreadsheet manually on Excel. Like what we could say, what you meant to say was. So
and that's kind of one aspect for just like common mistakes I see, is just not really, explaining what they were doing on their resume. But then also, once people get into the actual interviews, actually more in cyber too, it seems like people are just a bit more introverted. They're getting into an interview, you got 30 minutes to, talk about yourself and, get through the question that they're asking. Seems like, at least from a recruiting standpoint, I'm always, the biggest hype man for people. I'm saying, hey, you got to talk to this person. He's great. He's a good match for the role, X, Y, and Z. But once you get in the interview, that recruiter's not there with you, right? So you have to also, not be super humble. You do have to, put on a little cockiness, but not too much, of just saying like, hey, I did this, and I know what I'm talking about, and not just being like, oh, I kind of know what I'm talking about, right?
So I've seen some recruiters do it where some will sit on the interview, but like they'll mute themselves, they'll turn their camera off, and like kind of be like a fly on the wall. is that like do you know, is that like just like preference when it comes to the organization? Like, hey, like the recruiter can stay on the call. Hey, we don't want you on the call. We're just going to talk to them quietly on our own. Like, do you know, like if there's is that like just like a case by case basis, maybe per job rec?
I've never done that. I mean, I think that would be weird of having someone watch in on you. It wouldn't feel too normal or like a natural conversation. Because that's kind of how most interviews are. Like you can, have a perspective of, what's going to happen in that interview. But I think the best interviews are when you go in there and, you kind of have some prep of, some stories you can talk about from your last job. Because they're going to ask you star questions most of the time. Of,
Yep.
Hey, what's a situation of your last job where you ran into a problem and how did you solve it? Whatever, right? So kind of doing as many interviews as possible too helps you, kind of rattle those same questions off pretty concisely and all that. Saying, maybe by your fifth interview that you do, you're like, okay, I got this down now, and it kind of flows naturally in that conversation. Right?
Yeah, and just so my viewers know, like those that don't know what the STAR method is when it comes to interview questions, the STAR is an acronym, so it starts with, I think, correct, if you know it off the top of your head, let me know, but situation. So what was the situation, the task, the action or the assignment you had to do, and then the R is the result. So it will, and the way that they want that question answered, they'll ask you a question like, hey, explain a time you took on a project and just explain how that worked. And they want that STAR methodology of how they want you to actually explain the problem or answer the question. So very cool.
No. Yeah. I know when I was first getting a job out of college, it took me like, 10 interviews with different companies. I'm like, okay, I finally got this down. Cause you got sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes 45. And, when you're doing that, it's hard to, if they have preset questions that they're asking, I've hired for some companies that they have like 40 questions that they just have that, they got preset questions asking. And if you're like me, sometimes you talk too much and, it's like, you might not get through all the questions. So, it does come down to how much information can you get out in that short amount of time. And I do advise people sometimes when I can maybe tell they're, kind of like me, they might talk too much. It's like, hey, maybe answer that question concisely and in a concise manner that you know what you're talking about. And then maybe ask at the end and say, hey, would you like me to, do a deep or a kind of deeper dive on that? Or do you have other questions you want to ask me? Because that kind of gives them the leverage to say, yeah, I got, 10 more questions I'm trying to get through, right? Because I've had feedback from companies where they're saying, yeah, dude, I only got through 15 of the 30 questions I was trying to ask because I kept on talking, right? It's like,
good. Maybe kind of for references questions. Do you find it better, or like when there's always that like follow up? Hey, do you have any questions for us? Is there any bad question a candidate could ask a company? Maybe even like on interview 1 or 2.
Yeah. How much is the job paying?
Yeah. Yeah. Wait till the third round for that one. But that's like the last round question I feel like you asked. But
I mean, if it's for me, I'm telling people what the job's paying, right? It's like nothing really to hide, but because if you're making 100K, why would you go interview for a 70K role? Like, doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
So
it comes into the aspect of like, hey, like like don't waste my time. Like I've had recruiters and like Andrew. First off, Andrew is a excellent recruiter because he's actually one of the roles that he actually lined me up with. He legit called me, I think, after the fact. He didn't just let me know, hey man, they went with someone else, just so you know. I'm like, oh, I think I told you, like, hey dude, like you actually followed up with bad news in a sense because it was a role that I was looking into. But I'm like, hey man, like I appreciated that. Like I know some recruiters get like a hard hash of like, oh man, they just spam out emails and they spam out calls. But yeah, Andrew in staffing science, like I will definitely say, like when it came to customer service aspect of it, like the responsiveness and like shooting up the updates and kind of getting all the information I needed was fantastic. So,
yeah, I mean, it's not fun ever giving that feedback, right? But from my side, it's like, it's better to know it than not. And I don't enjoy giving it, right? But I like building those kind of, long-term, with people of just saying, hey dude, like this time didn't work out, right? But I'm going to be here doing the same thing. And how am I going to call you in 3 months when a new job pops up when you're like, what happened with that last one? You know?
Yes. Which could leads into a good for our fourth question. So can you describe the qualities and soft skills that can make a candidate stand out, whether junior or I guess maybe even senior candidates when it comes to cybersecurity interviews?
Yeah, I mean, like we were kind of just talking about that, but
that's how I love these, because they all feed into each other, which is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, this one is so. Yeah, this definitely comes down to how much information you might have on the company, right? Like, what the team's like, what the dynamic is. If you don't know, I mean, a lot of qualities that people really do enjoy is just someone that's like actively listening during the interview. Maybe will ask you questions that you just, you know, like trying to piggyback off of something that you said of like, oh, okay, so you mentioned this technology. Are you guys using it right now? Like, you know, just kind of making that conversation flow naturally and acting, I guess, curious during an interview. And I mean, that's kind of what companies look for is like, oh, okay, you know, let's say they ask you, you know, do you have experience in Rapid7? If you just say no, they're like, okay. But if you said, oh no, I don't, but at my last company, you know, some other team did, and you know, I got some exposure there, but I also have experience in a similar tool using it, you know, and I could, you know, hop on this weekend and play around with it, you know, and pick it up, right? Like that's a way better answer.
I've been told just a solid no with no explanation, no process of what you do to research it. Like it can just be, I almost call it like an interview killer. It's like dropping a pin in a courtroom and everyone just hears it. Cause it's just like I look at it like, okay, if I run into a problem at work and it's something I've never seen before, it's not like I'm just going to be like, well, I've never seen this before. I don't know. Like walk through the step process of what you do. Well, I'd maybe go on Google, who's the best worker of all, and do some Google dorking and say, hey, what's Rapid7? Oh, it does this, this, and this. Oh, look, they have some free training. Oh, look, there's some YouTube videos. Or okay, you know what? I do my research. If I still run into a headache, I'd maybe ping a team member, kind of ask for advice, see if we have a certain SME or a subject matter expert we can talk to that can give us a deep dive. Oh, it's a tool that we actually use and we have a point of contact. Hey, maybe we can set up a point of contact with the procurement or the agent we work with and retrain or do some additional training that we might have credits for. The straight up answer of a no is just like, oh, all right, well, next question. It's just like, well, they're just going to sit there like dead in the water.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a quality that like soft skills wise definitely will have you stand out. And, you know, also, you know, showing up to the interview with intent of, you know, I did research on your company, you know, at least go to their about page on their company website, but you know, that's the least you can do. But then if you know who you're talking with, the hiring manager, check their LinkedIn out, you know.
Yep.
I mean, especially in cyber, I mean, a lot of people are ex-military, right? So, oh, you know, try to bridge that gap and saying, oh, okay, you know, you were in the Army, same with me, or, you know, Navy, whatever, right? Like having that personal connection. I mean, people like to hire people they like, right? So it's someone that did research shows that they care more about the role of not just saying, oh, someone contacted me about this and I'm just here. You know?
Yeah. Doing that little bit of OSINT research on the company, their values, the work they do. Because, I mean, another thing, like just like you said, is a question that can pop up like, hey, so what do you know about the company? And like, if you're like, well, the recruiter hit me up and said I was a perfect fit for this role, so I applied.
I've had that.
And yeah, I can only imagine the hiring manager's like, really? Well, okay, next question. And it's just like, same thing, like probably like a dead in the water kind of response. Like you said, go to their page, go to the website, read the quick summary. Like, hey, this is what we do, and see what their values are, see the type of work they kind of do, the systems they work on.
Yeah. Having questions ready to go is, I would say most interviews, they leave you 5 minutes or so at the end of just saying like, hey man, do you have any questions for us, right? Kind of, I mean, there's so many questions you could ask at the end, but having them more tailored towards them of like showing your interest of, you know, do you guys have any, you know, projects come up in the next 6 months that, you know, that you're excited about, or, you know, that this role could help out with, you know, like where do you see this position in the next 6 to 12 months, you know,
Yep.
like, just like anything.
One question I kind of will get good and bad responses from. There's two I kind of have. One is, hey, is this position a position that's hiring because of you guys are growing? Or is this position due to someone left the team? I've gotten mixed responses sometimes, like, oh no, the company's growing, so we had to expand the team, which is good because the company's growing. They have funds, or they're investing into a larger team. And then vice versa. Oh yeah, we had someone leave the company, so we had this vacancy. Also not a bad pro con. Maybe they left because they went to bigger and better things. Maybe they got put on a PIP and failed the PIP, project improvement plan, and they got let go. Maybe they just need to fill a rec. It can go 50-50. Another is, I like to ask, what are some challenges they're seeing in this? Like, what were some challenges they faced in this last quarter that they're trying to work on, or kind of like some improvements, or just like you said, like, hey, what are some things you guys are excited for the next quarter that your team's working on? And that just shows them that your interest of like the past, but then you're also excited to see what's going on in the future, because hopefully you're going to be part of that project that's getting worked on. And like the response, are like, oh man, that sounds exciting. That's actually going to be very fun to work on. Like, as if I'm going to be working on it with them. Like, you get those answers of like, oh yeah, that's going to be a great fit. Like, I can't wait to work on that with you guys. Which, yeah, like I said, once I said that one time, they're like, well, that's if you make it to the third round. I'm like, all right, cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, it can even happen too, where you ask them, what they're working on, and they might say, yeah, we're doing POCs right now on some certain tools, blah, blah, blah. And you said, oh yeah, I took a class on that in college, or, in my last job, we actually implemented that. It wasn't on my resume, right? So
yeah,
just kind of digging around and being curious, like I said, I guess.
Yeah, I've had other run-ins, like, where it's like, I asked the company, it was an airline, and it was like, hey, like, what tools do you use? Like, well, we can't disclose that unless you were to offer you the official job. Then we can tell you the tools we use. But like, we use some basic EDR, like common EDRs and like SIMs and SOARs that you could find online. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. And I'm like, I get it. Like, to each their own. Everyone sometimes like to keep their company trade secrets because ethical hacking is a real thing, and like people like to go cause havoc and stuff if they don't get a job, depending on their skill set. But no, and that actually lines us up for our fifth question. How do you assess a candidate's cultural fit and adaptability to a company's cybersecurity team and the environment?
I would also just say this is definitely a case-by-case basis. Just because, at least with the companies that I hired for, some of them I've been hiring for, 5+ years, whatever. And if they put out a new security engineer position, I don't even need to look at it. I'm just like, okay, I know what these people want, right? And I know the people there. I know culturally, okay, the role could be, 4 days a week on site, but actually they only go in 2 days, right? Of like, just kind of how the teams operate and all that. And there are companies that are more like the Wild West, where it's just kind of like, hey, get your job done, or, no one's breathing over your shoulder. And then there's some companies where they like it more structured of, we're having a scrum meeting every day, and we're going to ask you about what you did tomorrow, or like what you're doing tomorrow, like what you did today. Some people hate that. Some people like that of, kind of being held accountable. So asking the recruiter, whether it's someone like myself or someone internal, definitely ask them those questions to see if it even matches up. But you will also kind of get a feel for it in the interview process too. I mean, they're going to ask you their own kind of behavioral questions to gauge your side too, to see if you're a fit. A lot of those first interviews, that's basically what it is.
Yep.
I mean, it's kind of what I prep everyone on. It's just, hey, first interview, get to know you, right? Like, talk about your background, talk about the role, talk about the company, but they're most likely not going to say, hey, how do you do this? What's the port numbers on this X, Y, and Z? That's usually the second interview, right? The first interview is, is this person going to match up with our team? How does that work out? And they might even toss some crazy questions at you too, right?
I mean, I had one like, what was your favorite vacation that you've been on? I'm like, oh. And it was just like, it's a get to know you. I call the first round kind of like that, get to know you. Just, hey, just be yourself. Like, I have a very extroverted IT background. I am a chatty Cathy. I am the one that goes in my work, and all my introvert coworkers are like, oh man, Andy's gonna ask me 3 questions too many. I don't want to answer any questions to him just because I know he's gonna ask me how my weekend was and how everything's going. And they all mind it. They all like it. It's not like I'm like driving them nuts. But I bring everyone out of their shell if I can, and it's just not all. I mean, I think like we mentioned before, of many IT folks, and it's just nature of the trade. We're introvert. We keep to ourselves. We like to get our work done. If we're remote workers, we got our hoodies up in our dark room without the lights on. That way we don't get our light burns, and we're just kind of getting the work done. And most managers know if they ask us to do something, yep, work's been done. Here's my track where I'm at. And just like you said, many companies also kind of, they'll deviate. Some will be hybrid, some will be remote, some will be doing those scrum meetings, if not like daily, weekly, quarterly. And it's interesting how everything's been moving from the COVID era of everything has to be remote, or I'd say pre-COVID era of everything's in office. COVID hits. Okay, everything has to be remote. And I'd say in the last probably quarter, soon to be quarter 4, there's a lot bigger push to kind of get that hybrid back in office push coming back, which I think for a lot of the folks that made it through the COVID area that got to see remote work is very much doable, and if not even more productive. That pull back into office is causing a lot of strain, I think, with many companies, and may or may not. I can't speak because once again, I'm not a hiring HR company that does this, but I could possibly see it causing issues and probably some difficulties trying to bring people back or even fill recs. Because, hey, is this position remote? No, it's not. Yeah, no, I'm not interested. And that could have been your best candidate. So it's just like being able to either maybe flux or talk to those people, or like, I know some people get medical exemptions and other exemptions to do the remote work, but I mean, I think you and I, Andrew, like, you could probably agree, like, if the work's getting done, and if I have to reach out to you and you can respond in a timely manner and get the work done, and I know I can ask you to fill a task and get done in a timely manner, like, does it really matter if you're either in office or working from home? So,
yeah, I mean, I could talk about that for like 10 hours.
Tune in next week.
I mean, from a recruiting standpoint, I'm like, you guys want the best person in the 20-mile radius from you, or the best person out there, right? Like, and a lot of people, I do see both sides though too, to where it does actually foster a lot of growth. Where, at least when I first started doing, my job of recruiting, I didn't know what I was doing, right? But being in the office with coworkers that knew what they were doing, instead of me having to Slack them or shoot them a message over, whatever Teams, and then calling them for just like a mundane question of like, oh, how do I do this? And then I have to bother people that way, when you could just kind of ask your coworker to your left real quick. You see they're not doing something right. How do I do this, right? And they help you out. So
100%.
See that, hybrid is something that people are kind of moving back to a bit. I talked to someone today that's been working remote for the last 2 years, and they're so bored. They're like, I sit in my office and I kind of want to just hang around people in my field, maybe once or twice a week. Like, just kind of, some people get bored. So work is half your life, or like half your day. So it's nice to work with fun people sometimes, and not going every day, I guess, but a couple of times, right? So
yeah, I mean, like, you have like, I work a 4-10 schedule for my organization, and it's like some people work 8s, some people work weekends, and like it's a pro con. Like, I enjoyed the 10 schedule. Having a 3-day weekend is fantastic. But yeah, I mean, well, Andrew, that's my 5 questions. I have one more. That's just like a question to kind of like, any fun games you've been playing, anything that's been burning the midnight candle, kind of just you've been doing for fun lately to de-stress or kind of step away from maybe work from time to time.
Fun games. I mean, I'm always playing League of Legends just for fun, but nice. I've been going to the gym a lot more recently, finally. So
there you go.
Kind of taking up my post-work days. So
I've been having to switch my schedule work. I was working from 6 to 4, now I work from 7 to 5. And I've changed my workout. I was working out in the evenings at 4. I'm now working out at 5 in the morning because I was naturally waking up at 5 to get to work. And I try to do it daily if I can. And man, dude, it's going to the gym in the mornings to get my day started. Fantastic. All those working in IT, super important to stay healthy, because we just sit in chairs and look at computer screens all day. So yeah, I challenge people to like stand up at your desk, do some air squats, do some fun little things that even at work to stay active, go on a walk around your building if you're in office, at your home, take a break. Sometimes when I'm working my remote day, I'll take my lunch and I'll go work out, because my gym's like 5 minutes away from my house, which is super convenient. And yeah, man. But that's awesome, dude.
Oh,
Yeah.
hey. Also, one last thing. On that last question you had asked me, I just thought of something funny of a question that a company asked, these candidates one time, just to gauge their like overall behavioral of, hey, like, are you going to match up with our company, kind of how things are? They asked them a question saying, if you were in the office and someone threw a rubber chicken at your head, how would you react? I was like, wait, they asked you this in the interview? They're like, yeah. And I mean, most people were just like, yeah, I would be, kind of strange, but, wouldn't, I'd be like, what's going on with this, But then one person was like, oh, I would get up and fight them, It's
does not meet cultural needs.
Yeah, no, actually,
aggressive.
It's like, I'll get up and start fighting. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, not going to fit in, but thank you for applying. No, cool, man. That's awesome. Well, any final words of advice for any of our folks that are like doing those career changes, trying to break into cyber, or still on the hunt for that perfect job that you'd want to pass out before we kick off out of here?
I would just say keep your head up. I talked to hundreds of people about their job searches, kind of what they're doing, and it is not fun. It's just draining when you're looking for a job, and the market is how it is, where you do 2-3 interviews and then you get second place or third place, right? It can beat you down sometimes, but trying to keep that positive mindset, knowing your own value, saying, hey, I'm good. You just gotta, I don't know. It's just keeping your head up, I guess. Right. So.
Definitely. I'll say this to add on to that. Like I applied probably, and my buddy's like, oh, you should make a spreadsheet. I'm like, oh, I'll do that. Yeah. After my spreadsheet hit about 200 applications with like 98% of them being like second, third round interviews, but then still getting those no's. Just like you said, it can be disheartening. Like, oh man, like imposter syndrome kicks in. Like, do I really know cyber? Can I get an actual role? But just like you said, just because you're not a good fit at one company doesn't mean you're not the perfect fit for another. So definitely keep applying, keep trying, keep learning, and stay positive. Well, Andrew, really appreciate you coming on the channel. I'm going to be sending you a cool link to the swag shop to pick your swag, courtesy of me. So just let me know what you like, and I'll get that sent over to you.
I can send you mine too.
Yeah, I'm totally down, man. Sweet.
Yeah.
I am totally down. So I have a plethora of shirts and stuff from like my Black Hat DEF CON trips of staffing agencies and tools and like all that stuff. I think it's the coolest thing ever. Like DEF CON has all the cool shirts and everything they make every year, but that could be a whole nother chat. Well, hey everyone, thanks so much if you stuck around this long. As always, hit that like, drop a comment what your favorite part or favorite question was, and that bell, and subscribe, and we will talk to you guys on the next episode of Breaking Into Cyber. Thanks.